Hello, Bible readers. It is Tuesday, November 24th. We're reading from 2 Samuel chapters 1 through 4 and Acts chapter 10, 8 to 43. The conversion of the centurion Cornelius. As my commentary says, this sets in motion the most critical phase of the expansion of God's people. I mean, what's happened thus far, of course, is the people in Jerusalem, mostly Jews, they have been restored. They've been given an opportunity to respond once again to Jesus, the prophet, the Messiah. And that good news, that proclamation that that's who Jesus is and that there's an opportunity for you to follow has spread geographically and demographically. If we had a map in front of us, we'd see how it's actually just expanding in the region. And demographically, what we mean by that is the kinds of people who are being touched are marginal people, many of them. And so like the Ethiopian eunuch, for example, a genderless in many ways person, the message is even getting out to someone like that. Now Luke is ready to show how the church made this most fundamental and dangerous step, which is going to involve the greatest struggle and demand the most fundamental self-reinterpretation for this movement of people who believe Jesus was Messiah, which in fact would in principle establish this group's identity as a universal religion, not simply an ethnic one. I mean, this is a huge leap that Luke is trying to make, that Luke is trying to explain. And so, Luke is in no doubt concerning God's intentions. From the beginning, we know that Luke wants us to understand that this message is for all people. You could even go back to the Gospel of Luke, where the Magi come to pay homage on behalf of basically everybody who's not Jewish. Sorry, frog in my throat. So Luke knows that Jesus is to be the light of revelation to the Gentiles, that is, everybody else on earth. The struggle Luke sees to communicate this to the reader, he knows what God wants. He also knows that humans, many of whom are Jewish, may struggle with this idea that this message is for everybody. And so the struggle that Peter has to understand what God is up to through his vision and what God is doing with Cornelius, that kind of represents many of the readers or listeners. And so there's the story meticulously goes through exactly how Peter responds to Cornelius. There is hospitality, visiting his home, preaching to them, confirming God's bestowal of the Spirit on them, a baptism, and then a defense of what Peter had chosen to do. Like, it's very, very detailed. And then comes the question, okay, well, once we've said that this message is for everyone, those who have been baptized, like Cornelius, are they first-class citizens within the people of God or not? That's a question for later, but that's the kind of thing that this huge leap is going to raise up for the community. Once we get into our text more today, God has shown Peter not to call any person common or unclean. That's how far his understanding of his vision has gotten. So the function of Cornelius's story is to bring Peter further in, to help explain this vision even further. In truth, Peter says, I'm grasping that God is no respecter of appearances. Peter's coming to see that it's not membership in a particular ethnicity or nation, but rather the way of responding to God that comes from faith, that's what matters. So this will be the challenge as the book of Acts continues. Is what does this mean that Gentiles are a part of the promise? Okay, 2 Samuel. I'll try to hit this one quick. The division between the books of Samuel 1 and 2, it's artificial. In Hebrew manuscripts, it's all just one book. There's one book of Samuel. Greek and Latin translations divided it. Saul's death was a good ending spot. It just makes a long book, into two shorter books. Today's texts conclude the history of David's rise. In chapter 1, we see David's loyalty and grief are greater than his ambition or self-interest. Upon the death of Saul, he laments. He laments for Saul and Jonathan. To sing through his grief is a good example for us even thousands of years later. Saul is dead. The Israelites are scattered. Philistines occupy the land. There's a power vacuum. And so it's not only David who gets anointed as king, but you've got this other one, Ishbosheth, as well. Abner basically takes, the verbs are important, takes, brings, and makes a king, whereas David submits. See, those verbs matter a lot. Then there's a Game of Thrones, whose outcome is obvious. David's going to be the king. And throughout the whole process, David remains innocent. And that is as important as anything that this 2 Samuel is trying to get across. How David becomes king is as crucial to whether he becomes king. Because as a guiltless king who didn't rise through violence, he then can wield power innocently and have everybody buy in. I am one with my God. My God is with us, all of us, at all times and in all places.